After generating nearly 8,000 images on Midjourney version 7, I've decided it's the most powerful image generator we've ever got our hands on. But also, I've experienced how hard it is to get those top-tier results out of this model. So stick around because I figured out exactly what to do about it, and it's easier than you think. Midjourney said in their original announcement that this is an entirely new model with unique strengths and probably a few weaknesses. We want to learn from you what it's good at and bad at, but definitely keep in mind that it may require different styles of prompting. So play around a bit. I read that and I took the message to heart. Since it came out 12, 13 days ago, whenever this posts, I've probably spent way too much time doing exactly that. I've just about run out of GPU minutes on my mega plan, and so I think it's time I share my results. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So what's good about it? Midjourney version 7 has the best world understanding of any image model to date. In that, I'm including 4o on ChatGPT, but understand that 4o's world understanding comes from a language model that works like an agent, which sends prompts strategically to what I think is a weaker image model, to slowly build coherent scenes. So version 7's strength and world understanding, compared to 4o, will be evident not in its prompt adherence, but in its textures, its photorealism, and the way artistic compositions end up looking. In my opinion, though, there is great value in that intelligence being baked into the model itself, like we see from Midjourney. And I want to give you an example that I think really demonstrates this. Sometimes you want to generate something like this here, a leafy sea dragon. This is a real creature, by the way. Australia's wildlife feels alien, but this is an example of a situation where our subject has features that are hard to linguistically describe. GPT-4o's language model knows what this creature is, so it does okay, but there are random flaws in the way that it generates. There are gaps in the middle of its beak, and its tail has kind of gone sweeping and curvy, more like a seahorse would be. Meanwhile, Midjourney has a sophisticated enough image model that it implicitly understands what this creature should look like in whatever situation you asked for. Version 7 does a great job keeping its anatomy accurate, while also mimicking the purposeful asymmetry of this creature that it's meant to have so that it can camouflage into its environment. And that's hard. With tokens like Sea Dragon in the name of this creature, this is a challenge that confuses any other pure image model. Here's 6.1, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion 3.0, and we can see the same sort of thing each time we get things that are not this creature. And just to give one more example about why the knowledge being baked into the image model itself is so important, you can ask GPT-4o to create something like a spaghetti bridge, and ask Midjourney to create one. It makes sense that reasonable and accurate construction of a bridge like this is hard to describe, even from a complicated language model agent, and so on ChatGPT, the construction feels very simplified and the physics that support this bridge just doesn't make sense. Why is it going into the book there? Whereas on Midjourney, yes, it's still not perfect when we get to edge cases like this, but it's clear to me that Midjourney's world understanding is able to build a bridge that makes a lot more sense. And it being baked into the model like this leads to all sorts of really great things downstream. Obviously, it makes the model run way faster, giving you the chance to iterate quickly and narrow in on an idea, but it also can follow very information-dense prompts. It beautifully renders photorealistic textures, and its physics understanding lets invented objects and interactions feel very coherent. We also get it being able to creatively add background elements that fit very well with your prompts, and from everything I've seen, this model has a lot of promise and potential. But that brings us to what's bad about it. There are a few obvious things that Midjourney version 7 does seem a little weaker at than 4o, which I think most of you are going to be comparing it to since they came out at about the same time. The first is that it can't really write yet. Also, its prompt adherence, especially in terms of relational understanding, is poor. Better than a lot of models, but very poor compared to 4o. I like showing this example where I started adding details into a scene until the models can't handle it anymore. This is a pretty simple 3D rendered scene. I add a top hat and then put it on a ramp and then see if I can stack that ramp on a cylinder. Side by side, as I grow the complexity of the scene, it's clear that 4o goes much farther. So much so that I was able to add a mirror and reflect the entire scene, and then I started just naming icons to put on an organized pattern on the floor, and each time it did a really good job, whereas Midjourney started falling off as soon as I wanted the ramp to be pointed at a specific thing. Version 7 just doesn't stand up in terms of that adherence. But so far, those sort of problems with prompt adherence and generating text doesn't really bother me. Midjourney isn't trying to be 4.0, and we don't really expect it to. In my eyes, the two models do different jobs, and that's okay. But that's going to be true as long as Midjourney stands up in terms of what we really care about: beauty and aesthetics. Which brings me to the ugly. Coherence and beauty overall felt, at first, like they took a hit, even compared to Midjourney's older version 6.1. It seemed like, on the whole, images were blander, faces were less coherent, and overall the wow factor I've come to expect from Midjourney seemed to be much less likely to show up when I generated an image. If you've been generating images on version 7, you've probably seen this yourself, but I'll keep letting examples play by. Eyes, hands, string, objects, chain, noses. There was so much that seemed to be going wrong when I generated even the simplest of prompts. But the more kinds of prompts I tried, I started to realize that the problems I was seeing were all happening because the image model was taking risks that it didn't used to. It wasn't that Midjourney is now not able to create images that it used to be able to, but it's actually that the image model was willing to do a hell of a lot more. Essentially meaning that flaws are easier to spot. Things that version 6.1 would hide in shadow and brilliant colors, Midjourney version 7 would leave out in the open so that now we were seeing everything wrong with it. And when I understood that, I realized that, yes, flaws are easier to spot, but so is brilliance. And we can see that a ton of images look really, really cool once we understand how to prompt for it. So it wasn't that images were getting worse. Instead, our latent space had gotten way bigger, and now we needed to get better at guiding the model towards the best, most interesting, and most amazing results. So, how do we do that? Because when I understood the answer to that question, it felt like version 7 had immediately leveled up and the images started to become amazing. Writing organized prompts. On version 7, good prompts respect all of those facts, from the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything we've talked about so far. First, I mentioned this earlier, we can use prompts that are a lot more information dense. That's because of the increased world understanding. But that comes with a caveat that we need to avoid lists of tags, because Midjourney will try to invent context for each one and make an image that's going to be beyond its capabilities. We also need to stay detailed enough to remind Midjourney of the kind of aesthetics that lead to those eye-catching, beautiful results that we've come to expect from Midjourney, but not so detailed that the prompt adherence falls apart and our results get chaotic. I've noticed a few more things. That information that you put early in your prompt guides the model in a much stronger way than information that's later. I've noticed we like full sentences, but we don't depend on them. We're not relying on the grammar to decide the relationships between things. It just helps Midjourney not overcompensate and invent an entire world just because we said it's in a jungle. And with all that in mind, I realize that prompts like this are challenging to balance and that they can be annoying to write. So what I've done is organize a prompt framework as instructions for a GPT, and I've taught the language model that every prompt should follow those instructions. So what you'll experience is an interactive conversational mode where you can work on and refine prompts that meet your requirements. I just clicked one of the defaults here, and ChatGPT carefully describes a prompt and then another prompt, and in total 4 different prompts that may work for your idea. And then, very similarly to my old GPT with more than 600,000 uses, I've had it describe 4 different directions you can take your prompt so that you can refine it even further. You can also easily copy one of the prompts you like, head over into Midjourney, and run that prompt. The idea is that this has been carefully designed to get as close to and as high quality as we can within Midjourney's new systems. The prompt is detailed, specific, and can create some really high quality results. This one would probably do a little bit better in a portrait mode since we're generating portraits, seeing as their faces got cut off just a little bit, but the photorealism and the textures in these results are unmatched compared to anything else I would have been able to get out of Midjourney. This woman in her 40s looks extremely photorealistic, and I love this result. If we like one of these suggestions from ChatGPT, we could absolutely do one of them. For example, if we wanted to explore emotional extremes, laughter, melancholy, confrontation, we could have it suggest prompts based on that direction. And what it'll generate is 4 more prompts based on that idea, or whatever you write or say to the GPT. We'll generate one more, and then I'll give you a peek behind the curtain so you understand how this GPT came together. I think I sort of just like this first one, so let's hop back into Midjourney and generate it. We'll see these portraits coming together very, very quickly. And while the expressions aren't perfect, they're a lot more refined than I normally get out of this model. It's a little bit overkill. I've also seen that actually turning stylization down with these prompts is sometimes smart. The personalization sometimes overcompensates for what typically gets voted for, and we lose a level of realism that the image model is normally able to accomplish. Even though these turned out a little bit more extreme than I would normally like, I think it's fun to see how wide the latent space has gotten that it's able to create a scene and facial expression and outfit like this so reliably across all of these different images. So now let's take a look at how this GPT generates prompts like this. I would love it if we were able to customize our conversational model within Midjourney itself, but for now, this is the best way to control how prompts are written. What I've done is I've organized the prompt format into a list of tags and transition words, and for the model, I define tags as 6 words that simply describe something specific. Whether it's the summary of your piece, it's a subject or background, or a descriptor that changes how something looks, I also have something to help control the style a little bit better. And it takes all of these descriptions for how tags get written and plugs them back into the prompt so that there's one tag per line, and it makes the results extremely easy to read. And also, each of these lines in the prompt are useful guides that you could potentially use in other prompts because they're just a kind of tag. And so if you like this kind of shot during blue hour with cool, moody tones, you could apply that to this prompt, and it's easy to grab and use and build prompts that are already well-written, specific, and following Midjourney version 7's requirements. I would encourage you to experiment with how interesting your images can get. This framework is really robust to handle as few as 1 tag and as many as 25 so that you can get a lot of control over where in the latent space you want to be. But it's also possible to get this GPT to write prompts that don't look good in Midjourney. So we'll have to learn together about exactly what the right balance is to get the highest quality results out of these well-optimized prompts. To support that, I'm sharing 3 links in the description. The first is my link to this new 2025 version of my GPT, so you can try it for yourself. The second is a paste bin to the text prompt that I used in the GPT to define how to create prompts optimized for Midjourney version 7, so you can experiment with it yourself and make any changes to get it even better. Lastly, there's a link to book a paid coaching call with me in case you want to work together on something in a more direct way. But all of this is laying the groundwork for what I expect to be a very exciting launch for character references and omni references. My channel is all about a realistic look on the best ways creative people can use AI tools to tackle bigger and more exciting projects than they could have done without them. And CREF and OmniRef should enable exactly that. Normally, I call out a video to watch next, but today we're about to hit 50,000 subscribers, so instead I'm going to ask you to hit the like button, subscribe, and look out for what's coming next, because Midjourney version 7 has me very excited. Alright, with that, I'll see you in the next one.